Okay. So just make sure I see everyone here who is a panelist on this discussion. I'll go ahead and call the special meeting of the Board of Selectmen to order at 6:04 p.m. This is a special meeting for the purpose of discussing the budget process and timeline with representatives from the Board of Selectmen, Board of Education, and Board of Finance. In attendance here is Christine Wagner, Board of Ed Chair, Bob Carlson, Nita Kincaid, Selectmen, Superintendent Peter Nero, Representative Dave McCord, who is in charge, I think, of the Finance Committee for the Board of Ed, Deb Martin, Business Manager for the school, Christine Dias, our Admin Finance for the town, and Dan Spring, who is the Chair of the Board of Finance. We do have other public who are in attendance, as well as other board members. Thanks to Nita, who worked to arrange this discussion, and just to kind of make, explain, it looks like we'll have some discussion starting with Christine Wagner from the Board of Ed, and then I'll have some brief comments, followed by Chairman Spring, and then there'll be the opportunity for comment from anyone else who would like to comment as well. Try to be respectful of everyone's time, and hope to wrap up by 7 latest. And of course, we will take as much time as we need to for this very, very important topic. So with that, I'll just turn it right over to Christine. I know you wanted to get us started on the discussion, so the floor is yours.
Wagner, right?
Christine Wagner. Oh,
okay.
Christine, yes.
Christine.
Okay,
thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so just a couple of quick things. I took a look at the timeline that was sent out. I appreciate a lot of things that went into that, Nita. I do have a couple of quick questions. One was the budget requests were due Friday, January 3rd, and I know you're going to get a lot of those in. I don't know if that pertains to the Board of Ed or not, but we're coming right off of Christmas vacation there. I'm wondering if we could have maybe till the 15th to get ours in, just so that gives the admins and Peter and his staff the next 3 weeks to work on it, bring it to the Board of Ed, and then we can get our deadline in, if that would be okay. Okay, and then the other thing that for feedback, I really appreciated that, there's only 2 meetings where we're actually meeting with the Board of Finance on that, and then we're getting it to town hearing sooner than later. I think it's really important that we get the feedback from the town on our budgets earlier in the process, so that we can go back and rework according to what they're thinking and hearing. So I think it's going to be really important that we get a really good attendance at that hearing. And maybe we can work on how do we get that done? How do we really get people to understand that while the budget meeting is important, the hearing is super important. So we can continue to talk about that. And then my other question on the calendar was just if we're going to do a February 19th, when we present to the Board of Finance, when will we get the feedback from the Board of Finance so that we can go represent for March 11th? Is there anything in there about when they would get back to us with feedback, or how that would come, or do we just talk about that later?
Christine, are you looking at this one, at the one, if you look towards me, can she see this or not? No.
Not really.
No.
So
am I looking at the wrong one?
Yeah,
Yeah,
well, yes and no.
Oh.
We sent out last year's just as a model.
Okay.
The way we did it last year, and then create what the plan would be this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess so our timeline obviously didn't work according to last year's because I thought last year's was pretty good with just having 2 meetings. It seemed like we had a lot of Board of Finance meetings. And honestly, they felt from my side, from the side of the Board of Ed, they felt very repetitious. So we're hoping this year, what typically happens and what happened last year is Peter had his admin go to their department heads and to their teachers and find out what their educational needs were and bring that forward. Peter met with his grounds department, his IT department, his central office, and put the budget together. And then we bring that forward. We go through several meetings, the Board of Ed does, looking at it, cutting if we can, putting forward our very best educational budget. And then last year, what we experienced was cut after cut, discussion after discussion after discussion, sometimes the same discussion. So our hope this year is to maybe get some lead and some guidance from the Board of Finance initially, saying, this is what we think the town can bear. We understand your contractual obligations. I think the Board of Finance has had, 6 to 8 months now to look through the current budget, have a really good understanding of what's in our budget. So we're just hoping for some initial guidance, and then we can come and say, this is what that will look like. And then, we can kind of build from there if needed, or if too many things are cut out to hit that recommendation. But it would save our administration and our central office and Mr. Nero a lot of work to have a kind of a ground level start. And that's kind of what we're asking for on this. That's really all I have at this point for the process.
So that you would still, on the new order here, you would deliver a beginning budget the third week in January?
We could do that, but we really would like some guidance prior to that. So that because they're starting to build, they've been working on their budgets, they're starting to build their budgets now, and really to go in and say, build your very best educational budget possible, we all know it's going to get cut. So we really would like to start with, where does the Board of Finance feel comfortable going back to the town with something palatable, knowing what their resources are, and then we'll build it from there. And if it's undoable, then we can work it backwards and say, this is what we would have to do to make that work. But I just can't have them put in months and months of that work just to, it was a little bit, and I understand all the questions last year, and I think it was a good process, and I think everybody had to hear what goes into that budget building, but I think we're beyond that now. Everybody should have a good understanding of that. So I'm hoping for some guidance from the Board of Finance, at least on the Board of Ed side. I'm sure Mike has things to add to that as well.
So Christine, if there is guidance from the Board of Finance, is January 22nd a reasonable date?
It depends on when I can get I mean, I would assume that at their next meeting, I would think that they've been having these discussions and would have a pretty good idea of what that looks like. So I guess if we could have a 4-week lead time, once we get that guidance, that would be really helpful. Because that would allow us 2 Board of Ed meetings and a third of special meeting if we had to do that.
Christine, do you have anything else that you wanted to add to anything, or before I get into comments? Or
Christine Wagner.
Christine Wagner, sorry.
Okay, sorry. Not right now. I just, again, I would like to see the process a little more streamlined, a little more focused, a little more understanding of what goes into each of our budgets. I appreciate, with the non-lapsing account, we're really looking at that as we were, instructed to make that line items that aren't repetitive, things that come up once in a year, so that that's not building into our budget. And we're really being conscious of that and looking at that. I think it's going to be incredibly helpful for planning forward. Just as the general fund is very protected, so is this fund. It really is a leg of the general fund. So, we're looking at that not to supplement operation of the education budget, but to maybe help us if we have an expense occur that's a one-time thing, that we wouldn't want to put that into our budget, knowing that that now becomes part of the budget.
Okay.
So you would be aiming, if we all could do it, at a very early budget.
Well, I don't know how much back and forth there's going to be. If there's as much as there was last year, the earlier we can get going, the better we're going to be. But that's where I think getting some direction early on is going to save us weeks and weeks and weeks of time to get that kind of direction.
All right. Thank you, Christine. And we can certainly, we'll talk more. I'll just go into my thoughts. So as you were talking about last year, I was kind of reflecting as for this meeting on the past 4 years, really. And really the last 3, our board has had to pass under our tenure 4 budgets, just because when we came in, the budget still hadn't passed when we were elected, and it passed like only days later, and the Board of Ed budget then was in December. So that was crazy. The next budget cycle, we had to deal with the revote on the school. So that was a lot of work that took away from the process, which we still ended up doing okay. The following year, we had some snowstorms that really screwed us up with our planning. So we got pushed a little bit, but we still, got through it. And of course, this year's been the pandemic. So we've had some time built into our budgets, and I think we've done really well as a group to still get those budgets passed in a reasonable time frame since we've been here. So that's thanks to everyone's working together, and we appreciate that, because from the town operating perspective, it's so important that we have a budget passed early on. I mean, it really puts everybody in a real bind if we don't have a budget to operate with. I think some folks don't quite understand how that looks, and that it's just a matter of kind of going back to last year's budget, and it really puts us in a bind. It creates a lot of extra work, and it's just not planful. So we are working hard to make sure we do this right. And so thank you to Nita for taking the lead on trying to get this going here with a good schedule we can all work with. I just want to make one other comment about the how our board has kind of moved forward on the budgets. It's been the practice of Nita, Bob, and myself that we move the budgets forward. We know the state is kind of an unknown a lot of the time. And one of the things we recognized coming in was that was a hindrance to our preceding boards, rather, that there was like this waiting for the state, and we'd end up not even passing a budget so late in the year. It's just so detrimental to the operations of the town. So what we have done, and we'll do again this year, is we'll just make the expectation that we're going to get level funded from the state. We always end up somewhere around there, and that's what we'll put into our budget, and that's how we'll construct our budget. Certainly, we know that there could be changes. We don't know that, and we don't know how long the state's process will take. We don't know when the state will pass a budget. So we'll go into it with that thought process, and then if something changes drastically, then we'll address that through whatever means we have to. If that means we end up with extra money, which has happened, great. If that means we end up with not enough money from the state, then we'll look to, whether it's make spending cuts or go for an additional appropriation, we'll do that. But I think it's important from running the town, from that perspective, that we do get our budget passed reasonably early. And I would like to see it even passed earlier than last year. And I think the timeline we had over the last couple of years has been pretty good. I don't know that I have the only feedback I would share is similar to Christine's, is that it did seem like last year there was a lot of extra meetings that weren't really necessarily in here with Board of Finance kind of back and forth. And I don't think we need so much back and forth, and I don't think anybody wants to have as many meetings, but I think we all want to have a good, responsible budget. So I agree with Christine in that, Christine Wagner, in that, I think we ended up at a budget that was, like I said, over the last, I think our entire term that we've been here, I think we've only seen a $250,000 increase over all the budgets we've put together. So it's been very, very reasonable. I think we look for, a percentage that the Board of Finance feels is reasonable. I think we'd come in and try to work towards that. And I think that would be a good use of everyone's time. So if a Board of Finance says, we think 2% is a good number, we work towards that, or whatever it is, whatever they say. And then that gets us a better starting point, I think, from the get-go. So I think the Board of Finance meets next week. If they're able to kind of come up with something there, I think that'd be helpful. That kind of ends my comments. And I can, probably go to Dan, and then we can just open it up if anybody wants to add anything, if that's all right. Dan's here from the Board of Finance. You just have to unmute Dan.
Everyone can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Christine Wagner, thank you for your comments, and I appreciate that it was a push and a pull and a tug last year. However, I have to say that we were in consideration of the school project and what that was going to mean in terms of mill rate increases in order to accommodate the debt redemption. So that was a piece. The other is that, as you know, the Board of Ed budget is the biggest piece of the town budget. And I was working with a fairly new Board of Finance, and I don't mean to make excuses for them, but when you first come in with an 8% increase on a budget of 14 million, I mean, you're looking at a mill rate increase of easily 2 or more. And we are just, with what we've done in terms of the school project, it's just not palatable in terms of getting a budget passed. So it means a conversation in terms of, okay, what's critical and what can be built within the resources of the town that then can move to an accepted budget. So I've been at it long enough, you know, I just, I know what it can be like, and we want to make it easier. And I would say that we did not put out guidance last year. It was the thought that, okay, we had school project, school modernization project, we had school of choice initiative. How are those pieces going to help build the budget that could ultimately lead to one that could be, in the eyes of the Board of Finance, it's always up to the vote of the people, but what could be approved on first round. And getting a budget approved on first round is a priority. As Mike said, you know, the sooner we can get a budget passed and move on, the better we are. That being said, we also want a budget that's not only hitting the needs of Board of Ed, but what are the other priorities and initiatives, strategic goals that are being built within the budget that needs to be attended. So it, you know, it is a push and a pull, and I would make the pledge that the Board of Finance will cooperate best we can in order to make all of this as streamlined as possible and get things done earlier than has been in recent years.
And do you want me to pull up the calendar so everyone can see it? That was last year's, just to make sure there's, I think obviously the purpose of the meeting is to try to make sure that there's some buy-in and agreement from what we agree to, so we can try to meet that schedule. I can pull that up so folks can see it, if that's helpful. Would that be helpful? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Very good. Yep.
Or was it better before? There, can you see it good?
Yep.
Okay. So I mean, this was what we put together last year, and it wasn't too far off of what was the prior year, really. We had certain groups that we had kind of taken the approach as a board of selectmen to have joint meetings with the Board of Finance, just to save other people's time, you know. So like a lot of these volunteer groups just had to come in once instead of, you know, twice, which had been the case, you know, years prior. We started doing that when, you know, when I came into office anyway, and I think it's worked out pretty well. And we don't bring in every single group that submits a budget. That would be a lot of groups, but we tried to bring in the bigger ones. As you look at this timeline, are there any groups that we would want to remove in the interest of,
So,
yeah.
Mike, I think that the list of groups should be brought to the next Board of Finance meeting so that they can see if these groups are the ones that they want to hear from. And then tomorrow night at the regular selectmen's meeting, the selectmen can talk about the groups. But we wanted to kind of stick more to process and timeline for this. My thought, I don't know how you all would feel about it, but I know we don't want to necessarily narrow down every single date right now, but if we made a target date that the selectmen would discuss the selectmen's pieces of the budget at the first selectmen's meeting, January 12th, I think that would be realistic. One of the pieces of feedback that we heard was that we need the boards and commissions to have enough time to approve their budgets. So if we have everything due by January 8th, that gives them that first week of January to do their final, they can discuss their budgets in December and give their final approval in January and have everything submitted over to us by that Friday, January 8th, and then I can make sure everything's in OpenGov by January 12th. So that can kind of be the start of our budget timeline. And then we have the dates that need to put in for the annual town meeting. So then we can kind of fill in the middle there, but I don't know if that's not aggressive enough or if that kind of fits with what you guys are thinking.
I would think, just to mention, I would think that if we, depending on what happens with the Board of Education too, with regards to their numbers, that we could have a very early time. We don't have to wait until May for this.
Well,
Go ahead.
we need to double check that.
No, it's not required that we go to the budget in May. It's required we have an annual town meeting by ordinance in May, but that doesn't have to be the budget. The budget
That's right.
doesn't have to be decided on. Yeah.
There is a statute that says that the budget is presented at the annual town meeting. So I need to just confirm that with.
Well, the other thing is the longer we wait, the more opportunity we're probably going to have to get this in front of the public and allow them to actually vote on the budget. And I think that's going to be critical this year if we can do that. So if we go too early, things may not have changed or evolved fast enough to allow for that. And I think we heard kind of loud and clear, if possible, and I realize it wasn't possible last year, but if we can make it possible this year to get a vote on our budget, that's going to be really important.
I would think, having had the recent use of the school and all that was done, that we could go earlier. I can't see why we couldn't go earlier unless there is a statute that's going to stop it. There are other towns in Connecticut that go in April.
But they might be charter towns.
No, not the ones that I know of. Yeah, okay.
This statute, the way I'm interpreting it, it's statute 7344. It says that it's at the town meeting. So.
Okay, all right. So we will aim for that then, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see any situation where I'd be surprised if we can't have the public vote on the budget this year. I think last year everyone knows it was unknown. I mean, it was chaos last year, and the governor did what he felt like he had to do.
Yep.
But now we've had votes. I don't see a situation where we're going to be in that situation, thankfully, this year. I regardless of where we're at with the virus, and I think we're going to be in better shape with the virus by then too.
Right.
But yeah, so whether it's May or it's earlier, or if it has to be May, either way, as long as we can get it done for then, I think that's pretty good. So I guess.
Mike, do you still want to be sharing your screen?
Yeah, I was looking for that statute, but you found it, so thank you.
Excuse me, what I'm hearing is that we can't have a vote before like the middle of May because we have to have the town meeting to request the vote, correct? And then we have to have a 2-week period before we can have the referendum.
No,
So we
that
have
part
to,
of it.
it has to be presented, I guess, theoretically, completely presented, like the first week in May. And then the first time we can vote is 2 weeks after that, after we've, because we always have a referendum, and assuming we're going to be able to do that again this year, hopefully.
Well, that ignores where I think what Christine Wagner was most interested in, I think, is the April public financing hearing presenting, and where the public really does get to see something, because by the time you go to the annual town, whenever it is, budget meeting, they're not going to have, they can't change it then.
Right.
Basically. So the earlier financial hearing is the important one for the public understanding it.
Right, and that's to be held not less than 2 weeks before the annual town meeting by statute.
Yeah. So you can do that almost a goodly long time before we did last time.
My only thing is that, when we've had all these votes and we've ended up later, if we could, I guess we just can't have a vote before the second week of May. And then that leaves us just, 6 weeks, I guess, before we actually have to start sending out tax bills and stuff, right? And have the finalized. It seems like I would kind of hope we could speed it up, but I guess you can't, because you have to have the town meeting to set a referendum, right? And you have to have the town meeting in May.
We can
Locked in.
confirm, we can double check this with the town attorney just
Yeah.
to make sure that
Yes.
I'm interpreting appropriately, but
Yeah.
Sounds locked in. We can, and the presentation of the budgets, like our Board of Ed budget, has to be done 2 weeks prior to the town meeting. Is that what you're saying, too?
the public finance hearing is not less than 2 weeks.
Not
before.
less than, so you could.
Yeah, so it could be a month before, it
could
could
be-
be 6 weeks before.
Okay,
It depends.
yeah. Well, maybe that could, I don't know. If we're gonna have, I don't know. Christine, what do you think? Will we have it finalized? I mean, the best thing is to have the presentation, so everybody's on board with it and they understand what we've got, as quickly as possible, but no. And then we can,
Because we can do the hearing as early as we want, and we can go back, take what we've heard from the voters. That's what we need to really be hearing from, is the voter.
that's what I'm saying.
And
Yeah,
so we can do the hearing as early as we'd like,
yeah,
and then take
more
that
important.
as a working, that's where that hearing becomes so important. We really need to hear from our voters as much as possible. And that still takes me back to, I'd like some direction that has some solid number to it, something that's accountable for. The Board of Ed is always going to bring forward a budget that's probably going to need to be cut, because we're looking out for the very best educational budget we can put together. So when we're working on our budget, we're talking about the very best way to educate our kids. Now, we realize those numbers don't always work out, but we don't want to work on those numbers if it's just absolutely futile and a waste of time. We need a strong, solid number to work from that we can start with. It doesn't have to be the bottom number that you'll think is palatable, Dan, but someplace that's a starting point for us that's solid, not just visionary, but an actual solid working place.
and we're hoping it's not going to be zero again.
Yeah, right. I totally understand that, but, and I think guidance is warranted. But guidance could also be one where even with that, you throw up your hands and say, how are we going to do that? So,
But at least we can show you that and show you what that looks like. And then you can say, you know what, that is really bare bones there. That's not what we're anticipating. And then maybe we work it in the other direction.
yeah,
But I think that's a better way for us.
Christine, in fairness to the Board of Finance, I think that we went through that process this last year. And yes, I know it seemed a bit like plowing the field again and again and again. But I think there was a lot that came to a level of clarity and understanding as to, okay, what really is critical here. And certainly the RISA account falling into place, that was contributory to finally making it all come together. So, and what I have to do is, because I've done it for so many years, I understand where you're coming from, but I also have to build consensus with people who don't have as much background as you've got or I've got, and we have to bring them to that level so that they're comfortable in moving forward with their recommendation. So, and I pledge that we will work to do that for sure.
I think Christine's Wagner's point is pretty well taken about public feedback early on too. I think, this year was hard. It was hard for everybody because of the situation we were put in. But I wonder, since the purpose of this meeting is to talk about the calendar, should there be another touch point even earlier on for public feedback, for, just because a public hearing, just because we've done it a certain way doesn't mean it's the way that we should do it. Does it make any sense? And, Nita, Bob, if you guys have any feedback, Nita, I know you've given a lot of thought to this. Do we try to put in some sort of a public feedback earlier on in the process? Yeah, go ahead.
Again, what's bothersome, Mike, is that these are public meetings that people should tune in on. But maybe there is meetings on the calendar where we can be more definitive as to say, this is one you need to listen to.
Right. That's what I was going to say. I'm looking here and I'm saying to myself, for example, we have the assessor's review of the grand list. We should get that before we think we have well, I'm assuming we don't know yet where we're at, but I know we're better than we have been. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. The report from the reval team through Daryl Del Grosso has not come to me as yet, even though I check every week. I think we're close. It's something that has to happen by the end of the year. And again, that gives us a picture of what will be the grand list that we're working off of, which is the engine to all things that we want to have happen that we're discussing through the process.
Mm-hmm. But and then the other part, getting back to what we're talking about, getting the public to know what's going on, is people are really getting used to what we're doing right here. Not quite as fancy as we're doing it, but another group that I'm in, all the ladies in it, probably most of them between 40 and 80, they look at these kinds of meetings all the time. We can reach out to people if we, if we put it in the quarterly, starting this next quarterly, and just have things that people could tune in on. People are not tuning in on these things as much as they could in town. So maybe that could be a way that we could get a lot of the information out in little packets and so forth. I don't know. What do you think, Chris?
What's bothersome to me, Nita, and I'll put it out there, is that you get some outliers, individuals who get little bits and pieces, and then they go to the forum, and the forum becomes more of the communicative piece to what's going on in town. And it's just too bad that somehow isn't linked better to what we're trying to do with public meetings. They're not tuning in on the public meeting. Go to the forum and figure out, what the pros and cons are, and then decide which horse they're going to ride. And that's unfortunate. And I'd love to know what the resolve is to that, but that's the truth of it. I see it year after year after year. So can somebody tell me what would be better in that regard?
I think maybe the calendar's good. I think maybe you highlight the 3 or 4 big meetings that somehow we get out, Mike, when you do your Friday thing and everything else, saying these are the ones you don't want to miss. This one is going to be the, initial presentation of the Board of Selectmen budget, the initial presentation of the Board of Ed. Don't miss it. Where can we get that information out? The forum is the forum. There's nothing you can do about it. It's always going to be there. But how can we get other people involved? I know with some of the things going on at the Board of Ed, we've had upwards of 100 to 115 people on our meetings lately. And honestly, it's been great. It's been people we hadn't heard from. It's been those kinds of things that you want to encourage the public to come to your meetings as much as you can and hear from them and address those concerns. And sometimes you just listen to the comment and don't address them, but you at least hear what they're saying, so that better prepares us for the next one. So I think highlighting out of all those meetings, what are the big three? What are the ones that have the meat that the people in the town really want to hear about? The other thing is, if we can get those meetings down to an hour and a half, 2 hours tops, instead of 4.5 hours, it's too long for comment and for people to hang on to try to comment. So if any way we can streamline those to make those meaty meetings something that the public wants to engage in and much shorter. And I think we can try to work on that and really get their involvement sooner.
Well, can we agree to define those meaty meetings as public hearing meetings? So like, those seem to be the ones that I think would matter. And as of right now, we have only one of those on our calendar from last year. And so we're suggesting modifying that, I think. If I look at it and say, okay, if I'm a member of the public who knows absolutely nothing, I want to come to a meeting where I hear a short presentation about what the budget's all about, and that I have an opportunity to make some comments. So, I mean, if people are really interested, yeah, they can come to the fire company, ambulance, or public works EDC presentation meeting. But I don't see those as and I want to make sure we have an agreement here, because I think there are ways to publicize it. Yes, definitely in my Friday updates, as Nita said, the quarterly, we've got social media, we can do press releases in the newspaper if we agree on what those meetings are. So do you think we should try to put in maybe try for 2 or 3 public hearing type things?
That would be fine with me. And I think the other thing, by doing that, it forces the total process. Okay, we've got to be prepared for, boom, this date.
Yeah.
Just creates that momentum to tighten it up and get it done. The other, when we mentioned the Zoom meetings, for instance, that run 4 hours. Well, the last hearing that we had an hour and 45 minutes of public comment. And it was the only venue that they could, okay, I've got my 2 minutes, here I go. And as you know, it's not always 2 minutes. So, but I mean, I kept track of that. It was an hour and 45 minutes of public comment. I mean, could we present something that, they're coming in on the town website with questions or their concerns on what they heard in these public meetings? Something that's going to be very visual and something that, so we're kind of doing the forum thing in our own framework, as opposed to outside of.
So we could create a, ask your question part of the website, I would think, pretty easily.
Absolutely.
And that could be taken care of in meetings or something. That's a good idea. The other thing we could do is, as one of these hearings, maybe it's not the traditional format. Maybe one of them is a Facebook Live event or something for those folks who want to participate that way. We could have, live interaction on there, because some people prefer to, there's certainly a lot of people who prefer not to be on that medium, but some people do. And so I know Christine and I have done, I think, Dan, the 3 of us did one of those. Maybe we've done a couple of them, and those are, you got to kind of pull at people to get them started, but usually they're pretty decent.
You would think that, people who are going to be engaging themselves in a public hearing are going to be equal. Well, they're not. You're going to have those individuals who want to, as much as I hate to say it, grandstand a little bit. And then there's others who just want to stay totally anonymous, but may have something critical to ask or confirm. and yet don't voice it. So, something, the forum within the website relative to the public meetings, I think gives people that opportunity.
So why don't we add a public hearing of some sort before the Board of Finance, on last year's calendar that I pulled up. I can share it again if you don't have it. Let me share it so everybody's looking at it. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where this February 26th, obviously this is last year's calendar, so it's not real dates here, but around that time, maybe before that period,
No, I think that makes sense.
maybe that's a good spot for a public hearing. We kind of advertise it that way, and we can decide how to do it. We don't have to figure that out tonight.
No,
And my only concern is I would want to be sure the Board of Finance has heard those budgets first. So,
The
like
Board of Finance heard the budgets that we have presented, or?
right.
Uh-huh.
Do you know what I mean? I think that, if I were a Board of Finance member and the way I heard it was from a general hearing presentation without the opportunity to digest it or ask questions or anything like that, they might be, and maybe they don't have a problem with it, I don't know, but I'm just saying, I'm looking at on that calendar, the 19th is when when the selectmen and the educations present their budget. I'm wondering if we go through all of that, and that will be a lengthy meeting as it always is, but then maybe the day after, can we present it again in a different format? Because no cuts will have been made at that point, no changes will have been made, but then the town doesn't have to sit through a super long meeting to hear all of that. They can if they'd like to, but then if those just want to hear what was discussed the night before at that presentation, they can see the first run, the first draft.
So instead after the 19th, Christine.
I think so. I think we need to have the Board of Finance hear it first. My personal opinion, anyway.
No, I would agree with that. I mean, I think, we have to have some background on, okay, how are we navigating this and be able to reasonably.
But then we can at least present the first round to the public, and if they have questions, we can answer what's in there. And then, the Board of Finance has already heard it. They're already starting to digest it. They're already, putting their things together.
So why don't we add that one following the 19th, and then.
So the new date would be February 17th for the presentation to the Board of Finance. That is a Wednesday. That's a normal meeting day for them. Go on.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm not necessarily, we could figure out, we could actually nail down a date now or whatever. We could do the following Monday or something.
Right, just a few days later.
Give us a little time to put something together. But
yeah, and we could do that as a Facebook forum if you wanted to.
Yeah, and I think the other thing maybe we should consider that as we're talking this through, maybe we should have an early public hearing that's like before anything, to be like, listen, people, what do you want to see or what don't you want to see in the budgets? I'm talking like
December,
January, just to say, hey, this is an open discussion, this is a public forum for you to just tell us what things do you like, what kinds of things would you like to see, and not that we'll be able to do any of them, but at least we hear the people's feedback early in the process, so we can maybe have that, as we drive decisions a little bit more. What is
Mike, relative to that? This is something I know I've talked about before, but that would be a good time to have the narrative as to what do we want the budget to serve? What's going to be the mission of this next coming budget? And it could be things like, just the day-to-day functionality of the town, but it could also have some strategic things in there, both from Board of Ed and general government. So they kind of get a sense of, okay, what's shaping this budget, and then open it up for, what their concerns might be or questions might be.
Last year we did a state of the town. And I think I don't know if the district ended up doing one. I can't remember if you did a state of the district, but it was later. It was mine was in February for the state of the town, which was kind of like what you're describing, Dan, but maybe it was I mean, it wasn't super well attended, and we did do it both in person and on social media. So actually, maybe it was more well attended on social media. I don't remember, but that could be even earlier. Like, and not, and maybe a 20 to 30 minute presentation, but really more to hear feedback if people would be willing to share it.
Yeah, and I guess my only concern with that is we're not going to have a presentation to share at that point. I would love to hear some feedback of what they're looking for,
Yep.
but right now in the middle of, we're just trying to keep our school running on a day-to-day basis, and to have some kind of budget presentation that early. I would love the feedback to hear what kind of support we have or not support or whatever it is, but I think waiting until after we present our initial budget run to the Board of Finance is better for us. I just don't know that we have anything to present in December. And I'm afraid what will happen is it's going to snowball into a COVID conversation for the education piece.
Yeah.
And I just don't want that to drive what we're trying to do there with budget. I just think for the education side, it's a little premature in December to ask for people's feedback.
What I was suggesting is not presenting numbers, but just saying, here's some bullet points as to how we want this budget to serve the town. Much like you said, the best possible functionality of the school on a day-to-day basis. And whatever else is, part of your strategic plan. There's no reason not to bring that in. Same on the general government side. So it's just a prelude to what we think is important, not considering numbers, what we think are important in terms of getting this budget forward.
I see your hand was up.
Yeah, so I was in lockstep with this meeting up until about 15 minutes ago, and then it went completely off the rails. So I agreed with Christine in the beginning, saying that we should highlight me. I think it was a great idea if nothing else comes out of this meeting, but we highlight certain meetings that we open up to the public and have public comment. Unfortunately, those sometimes turn to 3 or 4 hour meetings. But if we have 3 or 4 meetings in the course of a full year, they go 3 or 4 hours and everyone got a chance to speak, then I don't mind spending my 3 or 4 hours. Yes, some people are going to have more input than others. I disagree totally with having some sort of a questions asked ahead of time in writing and submitted, because then people worry about if their question was even read or if we missed a question. I say highlight 3 or 4 or 5 meetings that you can't miss meetings, and let everyone speak that wants to speak. That's as close to a town meeting as you're going to have. You're going to get anywhere from 50 to 100 people at one of those hearings, hopefully at one of those hearings, and advertise it through, like you said, on Friday afternoon announcements. Neither wants to highlight certain meetings in the quarterly if these are can't miss meetings, but to submit questions in writing just to make the meeting shorter. I disagree totally, because it takes you away from what the meeting process is supposed to be about. We know there's some things this year that we didn't have last year. We have every Board of Finance person has sat through at least one budget of all the seated members, not the alternates, but the seated members of the Board of Finance. Everyone's done at least one budget, so the learning curve won't be as great. We also know that in the last 10 years, the town's never passed a Board of Education budget higher than 5. I don't believe. I think it was in the high 4s. Peter would know 6 or 7 years ago, but I don't think we ever did one more than 5. And I know.
4.9.
What is it?
4.97 done twice. Same thing twice.
All right, so I'm right. All right, so then secondly, we know there's a given that there's probably people on the Board of Finance that won't accept anything but a 0 budget increase. Before they even hear the budget, and I'm not throwing any particular person on the bus, but it's not always the same person, but historically, the Board of Finance has members that will only accept the 0 budget before we even hear what the budget is. So we know that it's going to be somewhere probably between 0 and 5. So if the Board of Ed comes in at an 8 or a 9, it's not going to work. And if the Board of Finance says they want 0, it's not going to work. We got to come to some sort of a middle ground on the budget before it even starts. So Christine has some guidelines on where she knows she needs to be. But to make these meetings anything but as close to a real meeting experience like it would be if we were meeting in person would be wrong. So I don't mind putting in the 3 to 4 hours on a meeting if everyone gets to speak their mind, and everybody has a turn to speak. And some of it's redundant, some of it's the same thing, some of it's people go on, will have to be reminded it's a 2-minute only 2 minutes only. Maybe we have to have a moderator at the meeting to say, oh, your 2 minutes is up, time or something. But so I think that the highlighting of the meetings is a wonderful thing. If we can do that and get more people to invest in their time in those meetings, I think we're already a few steps ahead of where we were last year.
Go ahead, Nita.
I agree with everything that you just said, Bob. But I also think that I wouldn't ever start that thing in December. I think that we have a lot of stuff we need to do to get the budget ready, et cetera. And I think people want not more in December that's like that. I think the beginning of the year is the beginning of the budget for them, and we should wait until the beginning of the year.
I agree.
Can I say
So now we
something?
agree on everything. That's perfect.
Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, so just for the record, we've never brought an 8% budget to the town at any point. It started in my office at 8%, to be honest with you, but before we cut it down significantly before it ever came to the town. Secondly, I would be careful about doing things before the Christmas holiday. A lot of people feel as though if you're starting doing things like that, you're trying to slide something under the carpet. And even though it's going to be a very different holiday season this year, people still have a lot of stuff on their plate before they get to the end of the year. So I just be, in my experience, and again, I would just say this, I realize, I had 70,000 residents in my town. If we gave them the time that we do in North Stonington, I'd have to do a budget every 2 years because of everybody speaking. But I would say that if you do something before the holidays, I don't think it's a good idea myself personally.
Yeah, I don't think anyone was advocating for that. And I appreciate everyone's feedback here, because I think that was the point of this, is to kind of brainstorm some things so we can engage more people. I think that's all this was a lot of different ideas to see how do we better engage people. I agree, Peter. I don't think before the holidays is a good idea either, and probably January with a mix of. So we came to a couple of agreements on things here. I think we agreed on a date for another hearing. We were talking about the potential for another early feedback session, and. Maybe it's not December, but maybe it's January. And maybe it's more like Dan said, and maybe it's kind of a hybrid of the like bullet points of things that we think are priorities in the upcoming budget, but really more just, hey, what do you think, people? What are things that are important to you before we start this whole budget journey? Maybe that's what it is. And Bob, I don't know if I'm not sure I really agree with you on the written thing. I don't think we were suggesting we would take away people's right to speak at meetings, but one thing that time has shown now is that everyone's different in how they want to communicate, and that's really challenging for everybody, because if there might be people out there that only would prefer to write their comments because they just don't want to have to go through actually verbally speaking them. I'm not saying
maybe a combination of those then, right? A combination of written, but also anyone that wanted to speak would be able to speak.
Yeah. I think it's just a matter of trying to solicit as much feedback as we can to build consensus on something we move forward, because it's almost like unfair for like the Board of Finance to be, certainly last year, for all of us and the Board of Selectmen, to the position we were in to have to put this budget forward without the vote. None of us wanted to do that. But that was our responsibility to do it. But the more feedback we get, the more informed we can put the board, and we can feel good about whatever we put forward. So I'm all for, I would like to suggest a meeting in January, and I would welcome your feedback on it. I would think it would be something like what I did last year with the state of the town, but maybe just something less formal and more just like informal, where it's here's some highlights, and it would be not hard for me to do with the Board of Selectmen, or however we want to do it, looking at looking at quarterly articles about some of the accomplishments, and then looking at the strategic plan to say, okay, these are some things that are going to drive the budget process this year. That work's actually all been done, so this isn't something that's reinventing the wheel. And I'm talking about a short presentation, but really with the opportunity more for feedback than anything. Is anyone opposed to something like that where we have something like that in January?
Yeah.
I think that makes sense. I think in the comments I've made tonight, I think we have to be able to be preemptive against misinformation, give people an opportunity to engage with more opportunities in terms of defining meetings that we see that are going to be important. But I also think they also have to have a feeling as to, okay, for all the past budgets we've had, these are the things that we've accomplished. And there is a sense in that each budget process, we're going to accomplish more and make our town better. And, because I'm kind of at the anchor of the budget process, I'm not a bad guy. My members aren't bad people, but you feel like, okay, you're not understanding me, either from the voter side or, a constituent, commission or a board. I mean, yeah, we get it, but it's fitting all the pieces within the resources, the framework that is possible and possible by referendum that still is moving everything forward. So,
So I would suggest then, Christine, I know you're trying to pencil in actual dates there. We have on this list of tri-board meeting, which featured our representatives. I would think that informal state of the town, I don't know what we'll call it, but that discussion where we talk about priorities would be after that, I think. And, Christine Wagner, whether or not you want to somehow be a part of that or just attending, maybe just to hit on a few highlights. I mean, it's not, I don't think it's anything major, but I think if we kind of.
No, I would like to present as well. I mean, our budget's the bigger piece. So I think we definitely need to hit the highlights where we're at. I mean, we're coming through COVID. People need to hear where we're at, what's going on there, what the plan is moving forward. I would like it to be later in January if possible. And just because early in January, we are going to be seeing where the numbers are and talking about the possibility of going back. And I would like to have some of that work done and tying that into that message. So if possible to do it like third or fourth week of January would be great. Maybe third week.
Yeah, that's good. Third week is probably Martin Luther King on Monday, the 18th. We could do the 25th, which is actually the end of January.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Okay, why don't we plan on that? So then we're basically adding 2 more opportunities that we'll consider like bigger meetings for people to attend. And we'll kind of call those the ones that, hey, don't miss these, kind of, be a part of the process type of meetings.
And really for us not to take over the meeting too much, short and sweet on our part so we can hear from the community.
Agreed, 100%. Short presentations, and mostly just opportunity for feedback. And I think we'll take those to social media too,
Okay.
because people seem to want to engage on there. So, so I think those are a couple of good things. Does anyone have any other feedback on the calendar that we missed? Any other thoughts?
Mike, just a thought on that tri-board meeting with the state rep and the senator. If we're going to do that, hopefully sometime in early to mid-January would be good. Only because, as you said, it would be before we had the 20 meeting on the 25th, and we can get some information about what Hartford's up to. If we know they're not really meeting that much, so who knows if they're up to it. Maybe the fact that we have a new rep, I don't know whether he'd want to, if he'd be there more of an introduction, because he really can't speak on Hartford because he hasn't been up to Hartford. I don't think he gets sworn in until January. So I think that would be important to have in that tri-board meeting, Christine. That's kind of a presentation of it's kind of like the state of that board in the town. Like what's the Board of Ed up to, as if we don't know, right? With all those things going on, what's the Board of Finance? It's just kind of an overview for the town, and then the 2 reps, the rep and the senator, come in and they give us what's the state of the state as far as Hartford goes. But that information might be good to have prior to going into the meeting on the 25th, because we have one more piece answered. So it's really not a budget meeting for you, Christine, or for you, Dan. I think it's always been just a where you've been and where you think you're going, not a dollar thing, so.
Yeah, that's what the tri-board meeting has been. Yeah, that's
No,
right.
that's fine. It'll be similar to before, right?
And we'll work on getting a date on their calendars for that tri-board meeting. Obviously, their time is very valuable. So we'll figure out when hopefully they could come in, like you said, that third week or something, or the
It
second.
might be good for Rep Howard to come, even though he can't tell us much about Hartford, but to give him an idea of what North Stonington expects from Hartford, from the representatives, so.
And I do have to say at that last one, it felt like the public didn't get as much time with the representatives as they would have liked. So again, keeping our portion smaller and shorter so that this is the public's one shot to really speak to these people. So I think it would be important that we give them enough time as well.
Yeah, last time we had somebody showed up late at the meeting and it
Yeah.
kind of screwed things up. And I think we had another meeting following it. So I think we'll just try to make sure that kind of thing doesn't
Yeah.
happen. This time, I agree with you, Christine, on that 100%.
Can I run through these dates really quickly and just make sure what I have is what everyone's thinking?
Sure.
So I have, with the exception of Board of Ed, budgets due January 8th, the Board of Selectmen doing their first budget review January 12th. I will confirm with Daryl that he can get the assessor review for the Board of Finance for January 20th. January 25th, state of the town, state of the district, and feedback from what people are looking for from the budget. February 17th, Board of Ed and Board of Selectmen present their budgets to the Board of Finance, and potentially February 22nd, informal public hearing to present those budgets to the public that were just presented to the Board of Finance.
Yep. I think that's good.
Yeah, I think if we get a draft out with all of that, that would be great on the near term.
Yes, we can do that. Christine's already has it done probably. Is there any objection to me just opening up to the public at this point? I think we've gotten some stuff done here. I see Joe G with a hand up. That is Joe Gross. Joe Gross, you are recognized. You just have to unmute.
Hi, thank you, Mike. I just want to reflect to everybody that each one of you people have been voted by the public for leading us. And the public is not your enemy. We are here to help. I myself have offered my help to the boards, even though I'm not on the boards. When I wanted to be, they didn't want me. Now that I'm too old, I can't be on it. And I never wanted to be first selectman unless you knew all the financial parts of the thing. I just want to go through this quick, just from what I see at this meeting. Mike, you mentioned earlier, the first thing you mentioned was the numerous meetings between the Board of Finance, Board of Ed, and the Board of Selectmen. I agree with you. Again, this is a responsibility of the Board of Format. They must come up with a format in which they need their information fed to them. Each board, the Board of Ed, the Board of Selectmen, you must function on your own throughout the year. You have other responsibilities than just how this budget is. The budget is the responsibility of the Board of Finance. If you each give your information to them in the format that you work with, they don't understand it. They don't understand it. We must come up with a format that after you present it to the Board of Finance, they've come up with a format that everybody understands. I have no problem with the selectmen's budget. I can talk to them and get anything I want. I have no problem at all with the Board of Ed. I have the ability to talk to anybody I want there, including Deb, and they've all been helpful to me. So I can't go into that meeting, pick up a budget, and within 2 hours know what the hell took you guys 12 months to do. Just remember that. You can't put a piece of paper there and have a guy pick that up and sit down in a meeting and know exactly what's going on within an hour or 2 hours. That has to be done in another format. I'm trying to read off of my things here. Christine, I believe you made some very good comments here. The town has got to have their view budget. No individual, I said that, no individual can attend their meetings. They can't. They have no understanding. Part of the public is going to be ignorant. They're going to remain ignorant. I don't care what you guys do. You're not going to change it. You do have those that are interested, but when the public provide some information and then the board just don't take it. That's one hell of a slap in the face. So you don't get too many of them informations coming back to you. That's the way I see it. If you do get the comments, write them down and just review them. And it's very difficult for us to do them things. And then you got to remember also, this is a nice one too. But the Board of Ed's budget goes to the Board of Finance. The Board of Ed's budget becomes a one-line item in the Board of Selectmen's budget, toto. All right, if you don't know that word, look it up and you understand what it is. They only in there is toto. So the public does know some of the things that's going on. Dan, I feel very bad for the Board of Finance. I'm looking around here tonight. I see 2, 3, 4 members of the board. I come to the Board of Finance, who do I see? The chairman, no other board member. You gotta get them people interested in what you're doing here. It's not a
Joe,
one-man thing.
Joe, not
There
just
goes
to
my
interrupt.
2 minutes. I'm sorry.
No, not about your 2 minutes. There's other board members here. I think it was decided, not by me, I wasn't involved in it, that Dan was going to be, and I think one other member was supposed to be here but had a conflict. There's other Board of Finance members on the call, Joe, actually several of them, but it was just going to be a select representation on this meeting. And then Dan and his other counterpart was going to bring this back to his board.
Well,
So-
I feel very strong. We do have the knowledgeable people out there, a lot of new. We got to bring them along, and we're working on that. We are going to bring them along and educate them to what their responsibilities are.
Thank you for your comments,
done.
Joe.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time. I see Carolyn, you have your hand up, Carolyn?
Yeah, I would just like to say that I did want to attend this meeting and be able to have a voice and a seat at the table. We talked about that at our last meeting. I think that it's really important what Christine said, that you do want public feedback, but I think part of getting that feedback is having a way for them to sit in on these meetings at their convenience, because a lot of times the meetings are very long and there are at times when it's not convenient. So it's not that the public isn't interested in participating and learning firsthand about what's involved in this whole process. It's they just don't have the time to make when these meetings are going on. So if they're not made available, in a way that's recorded so that they can be replayed, whether it's a voice file or, a video file, then you're putting the public at a disadvantage. And then they're relying on bits and pieces of information that's being put out there to the public in different ways, whether it's on social media or in the newspaper. But it's not, the people that do take the time to attend these meetings and listen do know what's going on. And I think that it's only fair that these meetings be made available, especially now that we are recording some of them. We should be recording all of them, and that's my request.
Thanks for your comments, Carolyn. Does anyone else have any more comments? Okay. Well, I think this was pretty productive. Nita, thank you again for doing all the legwork to get everybody here, and Dan and Christine, and especially Christine and your board, by the way, just thank you for all you guys are doing. Peter, Deb, everybody from the board, Dave, I see Steph's on the call from the Board of Ed, Alex. This is crazy times, especially for you guys. So we really appreciate all the work you guys are putting in right now. With that, I'd look for a motion to adjourn from one of my board members.
So move, Board of Selectmen.
Bob makes it. Seconded, I'll second. Further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
good
Good
one.
night.
Bye-bye now.